This is Lightning Power Lunch with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli on Lightning Radio.
Yeah, I think it was a big focus for us is to come out strong, at home here. Just kind of try and get that complete full 60-minute game, and obviously it started with the beginning of the game there, and we just came out without doing the right things. We were playing fast, so sticking to our structure.
Things we had to work on defensively that we'd really had lost our attention to detail on the last couple games, that road trip. That was a big focal point going into today, and so I liked the way we defended, and then that first period the pucks had eyes for us. They did a lot of really good things to put themselves in position to score, but some nights those don't go in, and like tonight they all went in, and so it was we were fortunate in that regard. I mean, we got some good bounces, but I thought the guys worked their way in to get some of those bounces.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Power Lunch. That was John Cooper and company after last night's 6-1 victory for the Lightning over the Pittsburgh Penguins. And nice to get back on home ice and take care of business like they did. Good afternoon, Dave. Good to see you. There were a lot of good things that went on in that game, and the offense stands out. I mean, you scored 4 goals in 3.5 minutes in the first period. It's gonna cause people to get out of their seats pretty quickly. But I think what the Lightning are probably most proud of, and you heard it there in the clip from Coop, is the fact that they held Pittsburgh to 15 shots on goal, and they just got the 1 goal late in the third period, which really all that did was spoil Andrei Vasilevsky's shutout bid. And to me, that was the thing I think a lot of us wanted to see, was how were they going to play defensively after the road trip?
Yeah, first of all, great to be with you, Eric. I think this is our first show together this year, so Greg is otherwise detained today. So thanks you've been in like the host seat and the co-host seat this year, but good to
Always
be with you.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, Greg and I kind of broke down the games over the weekend, which were not good defensive games for the Lightning at Utah and at Vegas. And they've been a good defensive team this year. They've had some games or moments in games where they've struggled defensively. What struck me about what we saw over the weekend, though, it was a little bit of a new problem this year. It was a problem that we did not see in some of the other games where the Lightning had, we'll call it, significant problems defensively that hurt them in a way that they couldn't get points out of a game. And what we saw, especially against Utah, but also against Vegas, was a failure to protect the house. Like, they just left their goalies out to dry in terms of handling what was going on in front of the net. We just haven't seen them struggle in that area that often this year. Yeah. Is there the occasional play where a guy gets open? Of course. You're going to see mistakes over the course of a season. But generally when they've had kind of hiccups defensively this year, maybe it's been turnovers, maybe it's been defending the rush, and there was a little bit of that over the weekend too. But I guess I was going into this Pittsburgh game wondering, like, are they going to correct this? Are they going to figure out a way to get back to the way they played for much of the first 68 games, where 69 and 70 were the aberration? And, in the room, I actually chatted after the skate with Eric Chernak and Victor Hedman. By the way, hopefully Chernak's okay because he had to leave the game in the first period. And I asked them both about this phenomenon where, this really hasn't been an issue this year. It was an issue last year. It was an issue that they wanted to address, like high danger chances in that area right in front of the net. You extend it out almost like a baseball diamond to the dots funneling to the net. And both of them said independently, basically, yeah, we were just talking about that, or yeah, we just watched video on that. So that to me kind of told me that what was the area that was going to be emphasized by the coaches after the weekend? Because Monday was an off day, like we flew back. So this was really the first get together. And what did John Cooper and the staff prioritize? Protect the house. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, they had a very good defensive game. They allowed only 15 shots. I had them with only 42 shot attempts against. We can get into the game. I mean, where Pittsburgh is in the standings, if you take the hope away early, which the Lightning did, it was going to be tough sledding for them. But the Lightning still had to go out and execute. And I heard you talking during the intermissions, like they didn't get sloppy with the big lead, which sometimes can happen. So I thought they took care of business as a whole defensively. But in particular, I am hard-pressed to remember one open look that they gave up in front of their goalies. There were a couple of looks shorthanded that Pittsburgh had, but I'm putting that in a separate category because it was a little bit off the rush. Like, off the cycle, when Pittsburgh had the puck in the offensive zone, and the Penguins actually had some jump in the early minutes, what did they get out of it? The Lightning batting the hatches, and that was really good to see. Now, they're facing a team that's basically out of the playoffs. They popped in 4 quick goals. Pittsburgh didn't have much pushback. It was nice to get a game like that. Frankly, the Lightning haven't had a lot of laughers this year. Yeah. Last night was a laugher, but it doesn't take away from kind of them connecting the dots defensively and reverting to the team that we've seen for much of the year after, let's face it, an off weekend defensively for them out west.
Yeah, I can only remember one chance Pittsburgh had. It was 0-0. I think Crosby fed somebody like in the middle slot. Right, and that was the one chance, and Vazzy came up with a save. But what I was kind of impressed with was, okay, it's 4-0 after the first period, right? And you said it, hope was kind of taken away from Pittsburgh a little bit. But, you know, we had Yanni Gourde as the guest coming off the ice after the first period, and my question to him was, okay, it's 4-0. How do you make sure that mentally you don't slip into it's a 4-0 game? Right? Can you go out and continue to put forth the game plan that worked well in the first period? Can you continue to do that with a 4-goal lead? We know. We see it all the time. It's human nature that you kind of slip a little bit. And that second period, you know, Pittsburgh, I think, had 4 shots on goal.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the analytics, there was, I think, 16 minutes of 5-on-5 time or even strength time. Natural Stat Trick had them at 0.06 expected goals for Pittsburgh at even strength. I mean, that's the kind of performance. And sometimes it's your best defense is a good offense.
Yeah,
and
there was part of that last night.
Yeah,
that's the way the Lightning want to play.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't always happen that way.
There's always another team out there that says,
yeah.
No, we want the puck too. But I think that was a big part of that game last night. And in particular, you look at Anthony Cirelli's first goal that came from in front, and then Brandon Hagel's goal that made it 6-1 late in the second period. Those were the type of shifts that's like if you would draw it up, it's puck retrieval, get it back to the point, get it to the net. Puck retrieval, get it back to the point, get it to the net. And that's exactly how those 2 goals were set up. You know, in the first one, great work by Chernak to pinch down the wall. Nick Paul covers for him, collects the puck, makes a move to get to some open ice, feeds McDonough at the point, puck goes through, gets knocked down, Cirelli picks it up. On the Hagel goal, there's Brandon Hagel doing what he does, retrieving a puck and winning a puck battle along the boards, getting it back to Lilleberg, over to Perbix, drives the net, Perbix finds him backdoor, right? It's just, if a coach was to draw up, this is how we want to try and execute shifts in the offensive zone, that would be it. Now, again, the opponent and the game circumstances, but that first goal opened the scoring, and that kind of opened the floodgates. But those were the kind of things that when you talk about good offense is your best defense, those are the type of shifts. And it was a little reminiscent, and, you know, we're going to use that second period in Boston as an example for a while, right? Because they were so dominant with everything they did with their puck retrieval. I remember listening to you on the broadcast talking about how relentless they were in their puck retrievals. Right. And that's just good old fashioned hard work. And I think that probably had to please the coaches big time last night to see the way that they got that offense and the way that they kept in the game, even though it was 4-0. They didn't let the focus and the game plan shift away despite the score.
No. And staying out of the penalty box helped. I mean, let's be honest, where Pittsburgh is right now, they're top heavy. And they were missing Malkin, who had an upper body injury. So one of the few weapons that they still have on their roster wasn't available to them. And so by staying out of the penalty box, they were only shorthanded once, right, in the game?
Yeah.
So, and they took a penalty while on a 4-minute power play, but it didn't put Pittsburgh on the power play. And at that point, the game was 6-0. But when it was still early-ish in the second period and there was still time left for Pittsburgh to maybe mount a comeback, that was the only time the Lightning were shorthanded. But had they given the Penguins 4 or 5 power plays, you would have been seeing Raquel, you would have been seeing Crosby, you would have been seeing Carlson, you would have been seeing the more dangerous players Pittsburgh has still on the roster. I think the Lightning helped themselves by playing aggressively, playing on their toes, but also not potentially opening the door for the Pittsburgh attack. And when you got past the Crosby line, there just wasn't a lot of push there offensively from the Penguins. So I thought the Lightning managed the game really well. Cirelli and Hagel. So I don't know if you had this thought. Greg and I kind of bandied it about a little bit. Coming out of the Four Nations, I felt like they weren't playing badly, but there was a difference between them playing well and them playing kind of to their prototype, which is just in your face. The relentlessness, that you just used that word. And that's kind of their MO. And I feel recently, even with the games over the weekend, where the Lightning maybe weren't at their best, you look at the points that Hagel and Cirelli are producing again. If there was a little bit of a recovery period after the Four Nations, and it was notable that like the Lightning sometimes had a full practice, except for the 5 guys who were in the Four Nations, they gave them the day off, right? So they understood, like, rest up. We need you for the stretch run. If there was any kind of lingering effect, that seems to be completely gone. I mean, Hagel and Cirelli are playing just like they did in Game 10 of the regular season. They're both having career years, and they are both playing against the other team's best players, along with Chernak and McDonough. And on yesterday's show, we pointed out the top 4 plus minus rankings on the Lightning, and they're all in the plus 20s, are those 4 players: McDonough, Chernak, Cirelli, and Hagel. That tells you that they are not just matching and doing well, keeping the puck out of their net, seeing the other team's best players. They are pressing the attack and doing exactly what you said. They're forcing the Crosby line to play defense. They're forcing the McKinnon line to play defense. They're forcing the Barkov line to play defense when they get that matchup. And that is a huge asset, particularly as we look ahead to the playoffs. If the Lightning are going to use Cirelli's line, which you would figure they would if they can get the matchup, as the shutdown line against the other team's top line, for them to keep doing what they're doing, which is not just defend well, but be extremely hard to play against and drive play offensively, that's more than ideal for the Lightning. That's kind of what the Gord line did for them in the Cup years, except that Hagel and Cirelli have more offensive upside, honestly, than the Gord, Coleman, Goodrow line had.
Yeah, it's I think that, a lot of those guys coming out of the Four Nations, I don't think it was a physical thing. I think it was emotionally draining.
Yeah,
right?
You may be right about that.
You think about the emotions, especially that went into that first Canada-U.S. game, and the guys that played in that game, and then the build-up, to the championship game and everything else. Like, I mean, Brandon Hagel obviously was at the forefront of all of it, with the fight with Tkachuk off the face-off in that first meeting, and he was the one that the media would go to. He was in front of the cameras, and that's an emotional drain, and I can't imagine having to go from that back to game number 64 or whatever it was of an NHL season. And you could even see it specifically in Hagel. He scored a couple of big goals coming out of the break, but
he was sick too, right? Like he came back under the weather.
He had a rough voice that first game back, but you could see like his goal celebrations weren't Brandon Hagel goal celebrations, right? Like we're so used to him pouring all of that emotion that he plays with out when he scores a goal. And his were, by his standards, very subdued, right? And I'm sure, being sick probably played into that a little bit. But I think that now, especially coming off of the weekend, I think there's a re-energize. I think now you're down to, 10 games left in the regular season now. I think there's a light at the end of that tunnel. And I think that has kicked in. And they understand what they're going to be asked to do once we get to the playoffs. Here's my question. Who's going to play with them?
Yeah.
Right? It was Kucherov for points over the weekend. It's Nick Paul. We've seen different guys rotate there. And I'm wondering when and if we will see Oliver Bjorkstrand play with those guys.
Yeah, we haven't really seen that. I mean, he had
Saw it
one
in
practice
one
with
day.
them.
Yeah, and haven't seen it since. So I'm curious who's going to be the guy that plays on the right side with those two once you get to the postseason.
Well, it was interesting that Cooch went back with Point and Gensel, and Coop will do this. And maybe it was time. They lost 2 in a row. They'd given up a bunch of goals. He's like, I'm shuffling the deck. And that might have been part of it. That might have been most of it. That might have been all of it. But I wonder if some of it had to do with the fact they were taking on a Pittsburgh team that essentially is a one-line team right now. I mean, they're not a one-line team, but the most dangerous line is their most dangerous line by a wide margin. And so a key to winning last night's game would be trying to limit that one line. He had last change. I mean, he lost Chernak early. Moser actually played where Chernak normally does with McDonough. But as much as the Lightning could, they got Cirelli's line out against Crosby's line, and that was going to be the plan from the get-go. So if that is the case, who's the third guy? Was part of this that we have to deal with Crosby and Rickard Rakell, who's got over 30 goals this year, and Brian Rust, who tends to play really well against us. Who's going to be the third guy? It's going to be Nick Paul. So I think it was probably a mix. It was probably Coop was ready to switch the lines, but also he had in his head, like, we need to shut down this line. Who's the third guy going to be?
Yeah.
It's going to be Nick Paul. And that also allowed Yanni to go back to third line center.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been experimenting. He's been throwing a little spaghetti at the wall and seeing what happens. We may see Bjorkstrand with Hagel and Cirelli, but at this point we're down to the last 11 games. So I don't know. I kind of thought we would have seen it by now.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been in the rotation.
Yeah. So, so you mentioned that, the matchup situation last night specifically against Crosby line. So I wonder if whoever they play factors into who plays on the right side with them, because that's the one thing, especially bringing Yanni Gourde back, is you have versatility, right? You can move a Nick Paul up to a second line winger as opposed to a third line center. You can move Yanni Gourde from a third line center or a third line winger up to a second line wing situation. So at least they have the versatile pieces to be able to mix and match and find out maybe what works right now as you have an eye towards the middle of April. But I do wonder, and look, there's no doubt that I think Oliver Bjorkstrand is still trying to find his game here. I think he had an inkling he might be traded, but sometimes it can be a shock, and everybody's different.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll continue
first time he's ever switched teams in season too. The other time it was an off-season deal.
Yeah. But you continue to go back and make the, not necessarily comparison, but just the drawing on experience in the 21 season or the 22 season when Nick Paul and Brandon Hagel were both acquired. Nick Paul looked like he'd been here for years, fit right in, right? He had no problem, and it was a little bit different of a transition for Brandon Hagel, who never really felt comfortable until they got training camp the following season. He played his role well, but he wasn't the Brandon Hagel we know now. So everybody comes into a situation differently and handles it and adapts in different ways. So I wonder if they're waiting for Oliver to feel more comfortable with what he's asked to do, how he's asked to do it because that's an important role, right? Whoever is going to play alongside Hagel and Cirelli, that's an important role once you get to the playoffs. So I would have to think at some point in this final stretch of games, we see him put on that line just because you have to see it, right? And we know, having dealt with John Cooper for the years that we have, he does this a lot, right? He will, quote unquote, experiment. He'll move guys around because he just wants to see what it looks like. They get, the thoughts in their head. And I would have to think once Bjorkstrand was acquired, this was the thought. He could play with them. He has a little bit of a relentless approach to his game, right? So I would be surprised if we don't see that at some point in these final games. And I don't know how hard they want to push for seeding or whatever. They don't typically chase seedings at this time of the year. A couple times they've done it, and it hasn't worked out well for them once you got to the postseason. So I don't know how much the coaching staff wants to push for that situation, but I think you have to see it at some point just to know what it looks like in a game.
Yeah, and I think for Oliver too, he scored in his first game. He hasn't scored a goal since.
Yeah.
And it would probably do a lot for him to see some pucks go in. I mean, I think fitting in is probably more important. And I think he has fit in. I mean, he's doing what is asked of him, and he is contributing in a way that, is helping to pull on the rope. But we've seen it in small glimpses. I am not sure there is a player in the NHL, and I'm giving him high praise here, and we've seen him do this against the Lightning, and he's done it against other teams. And it's not like this guy's a 50-goal scorer. So take what I say with a grain of salt. But I'm not sure that there is another guy that I have seen in the NHL who can score on a wrist shot from almost any spot in the offensive zone.
Yeah.
Because he can shoot it hard and he can shoot it accurately. What has happened in his time with the Lightning is, like, we just haven't seen him be able to get the shot off because he has not been in a position to get it off. There are a few times that he has, and notably when he's done it, like I remember too, he's hit the post twice. Once against the Boston Bruins. That was the home game the Lightning had where they didn't play very well, but he got loose in the second period, and it was not a close range shot. It was a longer range shot. And there was another one, might have been in the Dallas game at Dallas. He hit the corner where the post and crossbar meet.
Yep.
That's his shot. It is as big a weapon as we're going to see from a guy who's, basically a 20-goal scorer. So I hope that we see that. I mean, look, I remember he scored goals against the Lightning. Like, he's a righty shot on his strong side at the bottom of the circle against the boards.
Yeah.
And he's zipping it into the top of the net short side. So it's not just that he can shoot it hard and shoot it hard with a wrist shot, because Nick Paul has a similar type wrist shot. His accuracy with that thing is incredible, but he's got to get in a position to shoot, right? Like, I think when he's gotten the puck, there's been somebody in the way. So, I mean, maybe that's part of the process too.
Maybe he just needs to imagine that there's a lightning bolt on the goaltender's chest.
Yeah. Well, I think he was an equal opportunity punisher in that regard. Yes. I mean, he scored against a lot of teams. Yeah. Julian mentioned he was the Calder Cup MVP his first year pro. He was playing, now they're Lake Erie. At the time they were Cleveland. It's the same team, but they won the Calder Cup, affiliate of Columbus, and Bjorkstrand was the Calder Cup MVP. I mean, that was really his one deep playoff run, because with Columbus and with Seattle, they've won a round. So he's been a part of 2 series wins, one against the Lightning when he was a member of Columbus, and then one against Colorado when he was a member of Seattle. I guess actually in the bubble, Columbus beat Toronto in that play-in series. But, to this point, that's been his greatest accomplishment as a pro player. They also won the Memorial Cup. He was on the Portland team. Wasn't Seth Jones on that team? Yeah. So he was, as an amateur, he had a lot of success. But I'm very anxious to see him shoot the puck that way.
I believe he had the overtime or maybe even double overtime clinching goal in the Calder Cup when Lake Erie won it, right? Like, so he scored a big goal at a big event as well. And like we saw, he was on that first power play unit for a handful of games.
Yeah.
Wasn't there last night. Like, like they're obviously trying to get him to feel good about his game.
Yeah, and what I'll say about that, Eric, is what I said on the air. I actually asked him about this when he got put on that unit. I'm like, how often are you shooting the one-timer? He's like, He's like, the key is to get it off quickly. That spot, the way the Lightning run the power play, that spot requires the one-timer, not the wrist shot. So, look, is he capable of scoring with a one-timer when you can shoot the puck like that? Yes. What do I think his biggest weapon is, though, as a shooter?
Yeah.
It's having the puck on his stick blade and zipping it. So, again, like the way they work the power play, it wasn't really set up for him to stop the puck.
Right. Settle it. Shoot.
Polish it a little bit. Like, he needs to find a way to get open and then shoot rather than puck comes right to the net. So, yeah, I mean, it didn't work out well enough because they got Hagel back on that first unit now.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's obvious that they're trying to get him into a situation to where he feels good about his game because, you see this all the time with trades. Once guys get comfortable, they really kind of open up, right? And I don't mean, I mean, their game opens up. And I think he's comfortable enough off the ice. I've had a couple of conversations with him during his time here about, finding a place to go. And it helped that he had Yanni with him and, to kind of help ease his transition for him and his family to be here. And once that's taken care of, usually the game on the ice starts to follow. And look, and not like he's played poorly, right? I just think
far from it.
Yeah, there's expectations that, he's coming to put up points. And what does he have, a goal and a couple of assists to this point? So people are going to judge on the points. But I think that he's put himself into a position to where he understands a little bit better each and every game, the system and the role he's asked to play and what he's asked to do. And I'd be very surprised if we don't see him get that opportunity with Cirelli and Hagel because as a matchup line that can play in the offensive zone, he can fit that role.
Yeah.
And, and if you've got two guys like Cirelli and Hagel who hunt pucks the way they do, he might be able to find some space to get that shot off, right?
Mm-hmm. You're right.
And to kind of clear it away. So, I'm looking forward to him kind of opening up his game and getting it, on the point. So, all right. So Utah tomorrow.
Yes.
And I know you and Greg will probably talk more about this game tomorrow. But having just played the Utah Hockey Club, can we call them the Mammoth yet?
Did they pick that name officially, or are they still down to like the final couple? Okay.
They're supposed to name it, but I read a report somewhere that the law firm that's in charge of the trademarks did not renew the trademarks for Utah Hockey Club and something else, but they did retain the trademark for Mammoth. So
okay,
we'll see if that's where it ends up.
Yeah.
But just having played them on Saturday. Like, it has to be, obviously, to be fresh in their mind, but to be able to get a crack at them knowing that game was there for the taking and all the stuff we talked about at the top kind of hindered the opportunity to get points out of that game, I'd have to think the Lightning would be in a much better position to face Utah tomorrow night than they were on Saturday, having seen them for the first time, the excitement of a new city, the excitement of a new arena. Ed was telling me how loud it was at the Delta Center and kind of how it's just really on top of, the ice and everything. You could feel the atmosphere in that building. Now it's going to be just a hockey game, right? A hockey game where you like to think that 2 points are there for the taking.
Well, the Utah Hockey Club, Utah is in a different position than Pittsburgh. And I think we saw that last Saturday. I mean, when you get to this part of the year, you have teams in three categories, right? You have teams like Vegas, frankly, or the Lightning, who are looking to hone their game. Their playoff standing is fairly secure, if not completely secure, and they're getting ready for the playoffs, and they're trying to maybe position themselves ideally, right? You have teams that are out of it, like Pittsburgh. And maybe they've made moves at the deadline where their roster is not as strong as it was before the deadline. And they can bite you in the rear end. Like sometimes those teams play loose. And if you let them hang around, they can surprise you. Yep. So the way to handle that, it's ideal what the Lightning had happen last night. It doesn't always happen that way, but you get them down early and you kind of take hope away. And then the other category are, these teams that are just right on either side of the playoff cut line, and their positioning is far from secure. And they tend to play, a very high level, high desperation sort of game. And we saw that from Utah last Saturday. That Utah played with extremely high urgency, and it played out that way on the ice. The Lightning were a little step slow in terms of, their execution, their thinking. And it wasn't that they were slow. I think it was just that Utah was more crisp. So the situation has not changed for Utah. In fact, you might even say the situation has gotten even more desperate for Utah because Detroit went in there and beat Utah 5-1. I didn't actually see the box score there, but Phil told me that Detroit scored 5 goals on 14 shots. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
that's accurate or not.
Yeah, it's close
So,
to that, yeah.
like Vejmelka, his numbers at the end of the game against the Lightning were not great because the Lightning didn't really apply a ton of pressure. In the second period, they had some possession, but they had trouble getting pucks to the net, and Vejmelka gave up 4 goals. He came up with one big save on Bjorkstrand, actually, late in the game when Utah was up 1. But clearly, he couldn't help them against Detroit. So they lose that game, and this has coincided with St. Louis getting very hot. St. Louis has won 7 in a row.
Yep.
So St. Louis in wild card 2 has an 8-point lead all of a sudden on Utah. Utah has 2 games in hand, but there are a bunch of teams between Utah and St. Louis. So this is my way of saying, from the Utah perspective, they had this homestand. They did pretty well on it, but they find themselves starting a road trip in the Eastern time zone. They're starting it, I know, with 2 playoff-bound teams, the Lightning and Florida. This is it. This is it. They got 11 games left, right? What are they at, 71?
Yep.
Yeah. Got 11 games left. They're starting a road trip. They're 8 points back. They need these points. If they lose the next couple of games, it's pretty much see you later. So if you're the Lightning, that's what you need to be ready for. It's going to be a completely different vibe than what we saw from Pittsburgh. Having said that, what you just talked about is absolutely true. This is a different situation. The Lightning are no longer in a new building, new atmosphere. They didn't even have a morning skate at Delta Center. For these players, most of them, it was the first time they've ever been on that ice before. Not that that was an excuse, but this is a different situation, and they remembered how poorly they played in front of Halverson in the game on Saturday. So I would expect a better performance from the Lightning. I am just saying that they're going to be facing a team with high desperation.
Yep.
This is almost like down 2-0 in a series, where if you lose it, you're not out of it. But if you lose it,
Yeah.
your path to getting in the playoffs is going to be extremely narrow. Utah needs to go on a run. They need St. Louis, honestly, to start losing some games, because the other wild card team, Minnesota, is still ahead of St. Louis. So that's where we are. And if you're Utah, you're like, we may need to come close to running the table here in the last 11 games, close to it. Probably
Yeah,
need 8 or 9 wins out of these final 11.
And this is going to be the return of Mikhail Sergachev.
Yes.
Right. So Utah's going to have a little bit of that emotion on their side, and we know what it's like when players of his stature come back. And we've certainly seen enough tribute videos over the past couple of years. We're going to see another one tomorrow night from John Franzone and his staff. They always do a great job of putting those tributes together. And we know how, like, Mikhail Sergachev is an emotional guy. Right?
Mm-hmm.
He wears his heart on his sleeve.
Yes, he does.
In a lot of ways. So you have to wonder how this game is going to affect him coming back to Tampa. Now, it's so late in the year, right? This is not Steven Stamkos in October. This is, here we are all the way at this point of the year. He's coming back for the first time. So that's going to factor, I think, into Utah for a little bit of this game. But it is going to be an emotional night. Right, and I think that it's going to be nice to see Sergachev back in Tampa for the first time, especially after the injury he went through last year and everything else. So, like, how much to that do you think factors in for Utah? Can that be an emotional boost, and can the Lightning combat that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they can combat it. For the Lightning, they've been through this quite a bit. I mean, going back, the players who have been here for a few years have been through the videos commemorating a player's return, and they did pretty well in the Stamkos return game, honestly. And that was earlier in the year. Nashville had way less at stake other than trying to win the game for Stammer than Utah will. I'm not going to veer off what I said. I think the Sergachev component is going to be fuel maybe for Utah. It'll be emotional for Sergachev. It'll be emotional for Sergachev's former teammates playing with the Lightning, I'm sure. But it doesn't change the fact that, like, Utah absolutely positively needs points out of this game tomorrow. And the Lightning are going to need to be ready for that. That would be true with or without a return video for Sergachev.
Yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit. I mentioned to you last night, I want to bring up Isaac Howard.
Yeah,
because
let's do it.
He's had a heck of a week, right? He was the Big Ten tournament most outstanding player, Big Ten championship game against Ohio State. The Spartans, Michigan State won 4-3. He had 2 goals, 2 assists.
Yeah,
That's called having
and the
a big
winner
impact on
the winner in
game.
double overtime,
Yeah,
right?
double overtime winner.
Yeah,
And he's up for the Hobie Baker. He's a finalist. He led the nation in points per game. He was among the leading goal scorers in the nation. They have this. By the way, fans can vote on the Hobie Baker. So if you go find the Hobie,
is that
Baker
how they
site,
do it? I actually never knew how they determined the Hobie Baker winner.
It's not just a fan vote. The fans get a vote. Mm-hmm. You know, it's kind of like the Heisman Trophy. It counts as one vote, and whatever the voting pool is, I think former winners of the award and certain media members and stuff like that vote on it. So there is a vote for the Hobie Baker, and he is one of the 10 finalists. Michigan State. I don't know if anybody saw that. There's shirts that they're selling too. Michigan State is selling these shirts with the advent of NIL in college athletics. He's getting a portion of the proceeds for these shirts that say "Be like Ike," and it's a green shirt and it has a silhouette of him doing one of his goal celebrations. And you know, anybody remembers him from draft day. He's a pretty confident kid.
Yeah,
in what he does.
He wore a unique suit, if I'm remembering right.
Yes, called himself Iceman, and you know, he's a pretty brash guy, but he backs it up with his play. And you know, Michigan State is in the NCAA tournament. They have their game. They're actually a 4:30 game tomorrow. So if Lightning fans are looking for a little appetizer before the Lightning face Utah, they will face, I forget who they're playing, but they're the number 1 seed in the Toledo. It's kind of ironic. Michigan State, the number 1 seed, having to play in Ohio for the NCAA tournament. But like the more you start to see him play a little bit, and sometimes college doesn't relate, but you're seeing so many more college players have great success at the NHL level. And, you know, in the conversations that I've had with Stacey Roost and, you know, listening to Julian talk about Isaac in the middle of the year on how much his game has improved this year in terms of his 200-foot game and in terms of his work in the gym, how much bigger he's gotten. You know, he's about 5'10", 175, 180 pounds. So this might be his last year.
Yeah.
In college, right? And for people who are not familiar with how college players work, they can become unrestricted free agents after their 4th year of college eligibility. They can choose to go that route. It would be in August, I think, is when the deadline is to sign college players after 4 years. Most recently, Sammy Walker and Cole Gutman were players in that category. They chose not to sign here. They became free agents. Sammy signed with Minnesota and has subsequently been traded to Utah. Cole Gutman's been in the Chicago organization, seen some NHL time. But you just get the feeling and the sense that Isaac Howard, once his season is done at Michigan State, and the Frozen Fours in a couple of weeks, if they get through the regional this weekend, we might see him in a Lightning uniform. I don't know if he's going to play.
Yeah.
But we might see him in a Lightning uniform sooner rather than later. We haven't had, I'm trying to think back, David, you've been around as long as I have. I can't remember the Lightning having this high profile of a college player be in their system like this.
No. I mean, they grabbed some college free agents who came straight to the NHL, notably J.T. Brown. He's the guy I remember. But the Lightning were missing the playoffs that year. And Schuster got a couple. They signed Schuster out of Nebraska Omaha and gave him a couple of games so he could burn that first year of the contract. But then he went to Syracuse, and Syracuse got to the Calder Cup final that year, 2013. Yep. Schuster was a big part of that playoff run. So it's not like he just went to the NHL and stayed there. That's very un-Lightning-like. But yeah, it could happen. The other question is, does Isaac Howard want to go back for a 4th year?
Yeah.
Whether it's to kind of run out the clock on the Lightning owning his rights, and or just going back for a 4th year. It would be his 3rd year at Michigan State. That's the other part of the story. He started at Minnesota Duluth, and it not only just didn't work out, it didn't work out to the point that he transferred. Right. So, what a move by him. So he goes to a different program, one that clearly has been much better fit for him, because even last year he had a great year. This year he's a Hobie Baker finalist and one of the top players in the country. But maybe he wants to go back for a senior year at Michigan State, which is his right.
Yeah.
But if he chooses not to, and this is something that I've kind of been thinking about, like, what goes into that decision about, like, what team, to the extent these college players, if they're high-profile college players, and they can kind of, to an extent, write their own ticket, to an extent, what goes into that decision? Do you want to go to a team that is well established in terms of being an excellent team, or do you want to go to a team that is trying to build up? And at first you might say, well, I want to go to a team that is trying to build up. But what we've seen from these teams that are looking to get better, and let's use Utah as an example. Utah is a team that has been near the bottom of the standings in Arizona, improved this year. No matter what happens in these final 11 games, Utah is a better team this year than the franchise was when it was in Arizona.
Yep.
And this is unrelated to the building or the city or anything like that. It's just that their young players are getting older and better. So if you are a young player, you are coming into a system where you're surrounded by other blue chip prospects, using Utah as an example. You've got Logan Cooley. You've got, I'll still use him as a younger player, Clayton Keller. You've got Dylan Gunther. You've got Matthias Michelli, who's not a high draft pick, but he's there. Like, they like him a lot. As opposed to a team that has more established stars, but might be missing the younger game breakers. And that's where the Lightning really are. I mean, the Lightning have done a nice job to keep their window open by kind of making moves to get younger players. But these younger players are not coming in with the kind of accolades that Howard is going to be coming in to when he turns pro.
Yeah.
So, like, this is my way of saying, like, look, I'd love to see Isaac Howard sign with the Lightning as soon as Michigan State's season's done. But I think it may be more than just Stacey Roos and company have kind of, like, been a good resource for him. And he's like, I really like how the Lightning organization have handled things. It might be like, I'm gonna have an opportunity to learn from top players, and in this organization, I'm gonna grow into being one of the guys that is leading the way.
Yeah.
As opposed to being one of 4 to 5 players like him, right? And a team that is trying to figure it out, whereas the Lightning are up there already. Look at Matthew Nyes. It's a great example. Mm-hmm. He went to an established team filled with top-end guys. He's good enough. He carved a path. He's in their top 6. He's playing with Austin Matthews, right? Like, he's producing.
Yeah.
So that's the one thought I had. The other thought I had was, like, how can we predict, if we can predict, future success for high-end college players? And, like, what is the main difference between, let's just say, the NHL game, forget the pro game, the NHL game from the college game? There are a lot of differences. At the top of the list is just frequency of games, right? The college player is playing 35 plus games. Once you turn pro, you're playing, 80 in a season. So the wear and tear on your body, like, you have to get used to that. But beyond that, so what do players always say, Eric, about the pro game and then the NHL game? Players are bigger, stronger, faster, right? So Isaac Howard has worked to become bigger and stronger. You mentioned his stats for his size. He's worked out in the gym. It'll help him. I think Julian actually mentioned this, the ability to win more puck battles at the college level,
which
has
is a
helped
big
him.
thing in the NHL.
Big thing in the NHL. I mean, it'll still be an adjustment, but if he has gotten stronger, that's a very good sign. That's the one thing about, not like, Nyes is a man, right? Like, he jumped right to the NHL, and you could see, like, he's a big guy. So the last is bigger, stronger, faster. So if the guy is able to win puck battles and the guy is able to hang in there against bigger and stronger competition, can the player keep up? And there's really no way to know. I mean, I guess you can watch a player skate at the college level, but until you see that player competing at the NHL level, you know, we're going to have to wait and see. I don't know enough about Isaac Howard to know if that's a strength of his game, but those are the three pillars. And I guess bigger and stronger are kind of the same, but that's what we hear, and that's what it takes. So the Lightning probably have to make an assessment about, like, we need him to get even more strong. We need him to get even bigger. Yeah. Or we need him to work on his skating, if that's part of it. That may go into the decision. We're jumping ahead here, but if he signs with the Lightning, they could bring him to the NHL. They also could send him to Syracuse, which is what happened with a guy they just signed out of Dartmouth who was a draft pick, Cooper Flinton. So he signed, but they put him on a tryout agreement so he can go to Syracuse. So the contract doesn't start kicking in until next year.
Yeah, and we saw that with Ross Colton, right? Colton was the same situation.
Colton.
He left 3 years.
He was only there 2 years, wasn't he? Am I remembering
it might have
that
been
right?
2 years. Yeah. He was
At
a little
Vermont.
older. I think he was 20.
He was a little older, yes.
Isaac was a true freshman, which is happening more and more in terms of.
So he still has the fourth year.
He still has the fourth
year.
And that's, for lack of a better phrase, the wrinkle in all of this, right? First of all, this is not Cutter Gauthier, right, who basically did a trade out of Philadelphia.
He was very upfront about that, though.
He wasn't going to sign with the Flyers, which means he was going to be a free agent. So they made a move to solve that situation. But, like, because Howard has the year still remaining of eligibility, like, that's how you bring him in, right? From his standpoint, he starts pro, which means you start making pro money sooner. And the team says, okay, come in, we'll put you on the big club. You'll earn some NHL money. You'll be around the NHL team. You'll get to watch Nikita Kucherov and Braden Point and Jay Gensel work and see what it is to be a pro. We'll get you a couple games, and then we'll see where things go after that. Next season, you come to training camp, you have to earn your way, right? That's kind of how it is. But that'll burn your entry-level contract. So you burn that first year, which means you're that 1 year closer to being a restricted free agent, which means you're 1 year closer to being an unrestricted free agent. So that's the enticement for a guy like Isaac to come out. And look, if Michigan State gets knocked out tomorrow, maybe he thinks he has unfinished business and wants to go back.
Yeah.
We say that a lot, and that, as you mentioned, that's certainly his right. But I just get the sense that they're going to try and bring him in this year. They won't push hard. The Lightning are not that type of an organization when it comes to these situations, because they tried to get Alex Killorn to come out after his third year at Harvard. He chose to stay, went back for his fourth year. Jordan Norfolk, obviously, and the rest is Alex Killorn history. So they don't push hard in these situations, but they do. I think their preference would be to bring him in sooner rather than later, because then you get him into your development program, right? You get him under the off-season program a little bit quicker. He can come to training camp in the fall. College players obviously don't come to NHL training camps. So there's a lot of advantages for both sides of this equation to bring him in sooner rather than later, which just tends to add up to a lot of, again, this is just me speculating and just trying to read between some lines. I think we see him here this year, and don't know what kind of an impact he's going to have, but I'll tell you what, he's got a clutch gene. That's, you can't really teach the clutch gene. Nikita Kucherov has it. Braden Point certainly has it. But you think back to the World Juniors last year, Isaac Howard scored 2 goals at the gold medal game, including a breakaway at the end of the first period. I think he had the only goal in the Big Ten semifinals. I think they beat Penn State 1-0. He had the only goal, obviously the 4 points in the championship game. Just a lot to like about where things could go with Isaac kind of moving forward. All right, I want to get to questions here, as you guys tend to do at the end of the show. So we'll start with Reddy from YouTube. Great game last night. Was it that Tampa played that well, or the Pens played worse, relieving their goalie after 4 scores? I think you touched on it a little bit, but I'll give you that answer again.
Yeah, so I didn't think the Lightning actually started that well. And look, we had a cross-country flight on Monday, so is it shocking to me that they weren't totally in sync from the opening face-off? It can happen, but they didn't get hurt by that. And that was my point. It's not like they were they were feeding the Pittsburgh attack or they were leaving guys open in front. I mean, I think when Cirelli scored to make it 1-0, it was the third Lightning shot, which tells you how little activity they had because that goal came 12 minutes and 13 seconds into the first period. But I think the Penguins only had 3 or 4 themselves. They only finished with 4 first period shots. So it was kind of a nothing first half of the first period. The Lightning needed to get their game going. But once they did, they benefited from some puck luck. Coop talked about that. The first goal, they got some puck luck in that, I mean, it wasn't puck luck that Paul had a tip. It was a nice tip, but it hit Cirelli. Yep, once it hit Cirelli and dropped right down on his stick, Jari is moving and opens up the 5-hole, and Cirelli puts it in. There's no question they got a bounce on the second goal where McDonough throws it from the corner in front. It hits Rickard Rakell in the skate and goes in. And then Jari had a soft goal, frankly, on the third one. So at that point, the floodgates had opened, and then we kind of got this narrative. The Lightning were feeling it. Brian talks about this, Brian Engblom. The Lightning are a team that plays on feel. Like when things are going well, it really helps their game, and I think it did last night. And Pittsburgh was like, "Are you kidding me?" 4-0.
Yeah. And Tristan Jarry had been playing well. Obviously, he'd been kind of a launching point for some of the lack of success they had early in the year. I don't know how many games he led in the first shot of the game, but he'd been playing well of late. He went down and spent some time in the AHL, and so he must have been scratching his head, saying, "What's going on here?" And it happens sometimes. It's as they say, that's hockey. All right, from Daniel from X, it was great to see Kucherov come back after that nasty dental hit to not only score but to actually smile, and even saw him wave briefly to a little girl at the glass before the face-off. Happy Cooch makes for an even more fun watch. Yeah, that was his. You talk about emotion coming out. That was a big smile. From Andy Kucherov, who basically just snuck back on the ice.
Yeah,
right?
He wasn't out for power play one, and power play one looked completely lost without him out there. That was when the Penguins had those 2 shorthanded shots. Phil and I actually thought it was a rib cage problem when he went into the post, but apparently it was, the teeth. Yeah.
I think his mouth actually hit the helmet of Jari or Delkovich. That's because I thought it was the post. I thought it was the upper part of the post as well, but I didn't go back and look at it. I think he actually went face first right into the mask. Right on the top of the mask, but he was definitely sharing some shard chiclets last night after the game. But it is. I mean, Daniel's right. Seeing Nikita Kucherov happy, that's never a bad thing.
And his 5th 100-point season, I was surprised to learn he's the first Russian to have 5 100-point seasons. You think about the great Russians that have played in the NHL.
Yep. Yeah, Fedorov.
If you're more of a facilitator, I think it becomes 100 points is more reachable when you're not Ovechkin. Like, when you're doing the majority of your point damage by goal scoring, it becomes harder to get to 100 points. Not impossible, but harder. Cooch, he's throwing in 70 assists every year. That becomes more manageable. But you think about the history of the game. He's the first Russian to do it 5 times. It's very impressive.
And just the 10th player for 3 consecutive 70 assist seasons.
Yeah.
As well. So nice little history. But again, to me, the game last night was more about defense than offense. But from Jay on X, it's a good win. Nice to see so many goals. Jari gets rattled after giving up 1 or so it seems. Cirelli and Hagel remain elite. Kucherov fell out of bed and got 3 points. No surprise there. Again, quiet 100-point season, quiet 3-point night outside of the goal for Nikita Kucherov, but that's what he does, right? Like I tell Greg all the time, Connor McDavid wows us at real time. Nikita Kucherov wows us when we go back and look at a replay, right? That's just how the kind of player he is, and lo and behold, he's another 100-point season for him, and again in the Art Ross Trophy race.
And leading the NHL in power play assists and power play points. So we have heard from some fans who have expressed concern about the power play this year, which, is still having a good year. They got a goal last night. They entered last night's game 5th. But, what is inescapable is that, for Kucherov to lead the NHL in these 2 categories means that the power play has had a pretty good year. And that's really where, that's how he's getting to 100 points, right? Because he is the straw that stirs the drink on the power play.
Yeah, and he's got 5-on-5 points. I know he leads.
I know. I don't mean that it was only power play, but
Well,
we were worried about the power play this year to the extent that like they were going to have to find another way of doing things or with different personnel without Stamkos, and it has not slowed Kucherov in terms of his productivity in the power play one iota.
Well, people want to say he's a power play muncher, right? Like he just fuels off the power play. It's not the case. He's very good on the power play, and that's why he's there. But, you get 100 points. He's still getting 65, 70 points, 5-on-5 play. And we know that that's been a strength of the Lightning this year, has their 5-on-5 play. Just look at it in their goal differential. It's been a big part of who they are this year. From Thaw345 on YouTube, what are the odds Nashville buys out Stammer in the offseason and the Bolts sign him for low? Boy,
Zero.
Stirring the
Zero.
pot here.
Yeah, that is a 0% possibility.
Well, Nashville's not going to buy him out anyway.
Yeah, he's got 3 years left on his deal. If you buy out a player, you're on the hook for 2/3 of that salary spread over double the term. So it's 1/3.
Yep.
So they'd have to pay him for the next 6 years 1/3 of his salary. What is he getting? 8? So I mean, a little under $3 million. Yeah, I mean, a little under $3 million a year for 6 years. No.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
And that's more on the Nashville side. That makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
What would be more likely is they find a way to trade him, but I don't know that they want to do that.
Well, and I think too,
they've had just a horrific year,
Yeah,
and they may
absolutely.
just look to do a reset and be like, let's figure out what happened this year.
Yeah.
And Stammer, you're part of what we're doing moving forward here, but we need to figure some stuff out.
I think that is the scenario. That's the one, because Nashville invested so much in him. Marchessault and Brady Shea were the 3 big names that they brought in during the offseason. And you saw it at the trade deadline. They didn't blow it up, right? They didn't just say, we're gassing this guy, gassing that guy. They made some calculated moves and, moved some guys out. I think that, Barry Trotz's first year there as GM, that's what's going to happen. They're going to go back to training camp and say, okay, now how can we get this right? We know that this can work. We've got the players to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So just from that aspect, it doesn't make any sense for Nashville to even entertain the idea, because we know it. We saw it firsthand here for a decade and a half. Yes, Steven Stamkos is a great player on the ice. His presence in the locker room, his ability to the way he handles teammates and works with teammates and handles a room from a leadership standpoint is just as valuable as what he does on the ice. So he will be part of whatever solution Nashville tries to come up with. He won't be a guy to say, nah, it's not working. We're just going to get rid of you. And you're right. If that's going to happen, it's going to be a trade situation, but it won't be here. Right? We know. I mean, the salary cap is a salary cap, and even though it's going to go up, the Lightning don't have that kind of thought process.
Well, they have, and we can get into this on another show. The Lightning really don't have any of their, players that are making considerable money. We'll call it that, significantly more than the league minimum. Most of those players are locked up. Now, the 2 points I will make, as the cap is going up $7.5 million next year, they've added the contract of Oliver Bjorkstrand, which is going to go toward, like, to the extent it went up $7.5 million for next year or is going up, some of that is being eaten up by the Bjorkstrand salary because they didn't have that at the start of this year. And Julian expressed interest in getting Yanni Gourde re-signed. So if that is in the works, that is going to eat up some of that as well. At the same time, you may see some players who are currently under contract, whose contracts are ending, but are making close to the league minimum. Maybe the Lightning, do not bring those players back, but you would presume they're going to bring back comparable players who are making also close to the league minimum.
Yeah,
but it's not like they have $7.5 million of just, we can spend 7.5 because of the Bjorkstrand contract has entered the conversation, right, for next year.
And you also have to at least keep in cognizant mindset of Connor Geekie, right? He spent the first half of the year here, and those players on those entry-level contracts have bonus potential that you have to account for in the cap. So if anybody has heard the overage bonuses, what that means is basically you had bonuses that put you up over the cap. You have to push them towards next year. Not saying that's going to happen, but that's just something that teams have to keep in mind with their salary cap structure and what it means for players on an entry-level contract, say like a potential Isaac Howard, right?
Yeah.
Like if he's in that mix, you have to account for what his bonus structure might be. And, those base salaries are $875 or whatever they are, $900. But the bonus structure can push it up to $3.5 million. So you have to account for those cap numbers as well. So it's a nice sentimental thought. Ryan McDonough came back. Yanni Gourde came back.
Yeah.
I don't know that as much as I think a lot of us would love to see it, I don't think it's in the cards.
I'm not saying it isn't going to happen. Just the way that question was phrased, there's no way. Look, I may be proven completely wrong. I will be beyond shocked if the Nashville Predators buy out Stamkos' contract with 3 years left on the contract.
Yep.
That makes no sense whatsoever. Teams buy out a player when they are desperate to free up cap money. Because you pay a severe price. Literally, you pay a severe price to do that. That's why teams are like disincentivized to do it. Because you're paying the player for years and years and years and years after the player is no longer, playing for you.
Yep. Not quite Bobby Bonilla status, but yes, that's the way it works. So, and the last one here from Vav, Dave Mishkin for Foster Hewitt Award. That's one I can get behind.
Well, I guess I actually don't have a vote. I can nominate someone, but I actually didn't nominate anyone this year. Color me shocked. Thank you for the sentiment. Yeah, I don't really get too worked up about that, but I was very happy to see when Rick got the award a few years back. And this guy's already gotten the award, but Sam Rosen is going to be leaving the booth, and a great man. Phil actually told me they had a ceremony for Sam, and it's not the last game, but they had one recently, and Phil went up for the ceremony, which was really nice.
Nice. I didn't know.
We must have been on the road when that happened because he told me about it last night.
Yeah, I know it was.
We, the Lightning, are going to be in New York for the final regular season game the Rangers are going to be playing. So if the Rangers miss the playoffs, that will be Sam Rosen's final broadcast.
Yeah. That'll be kind of cool for you guys, to kind of see that. So, but we will see you tomorrow night.
Yeah. Thanks for sitting in, Eric.
Yeah, no, it's always fun. I'm always appreciative of the opportunity to kind of sit in with you guys and just talk some hockey for an hour and go over some good stuff. It's always a great conversation. And, again, Utah tomorrow night, 7 o'clock.
All right. See you tomorrow. And Greg and I will be back for regular power lunch tomorrow at noon.
Yep. Sounds good. After pregame skate, so that'll be good stuff. Dave, thank you so much for allowing me to fill in for Greg. Greg, thanks for taking the day off so I could fill in. Thanks to Steve Versnick for keeping us in line, everything else. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Thanks for the questions. This has been Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network. We'll see you next time.